Hi, Dr. P here to talk about the problems when rules that are too concise become incomplete or incomprehensible. I've seen lots of suggestions about brevity in writing and speaking lately. I put the URL of one here that talks specifically about concise rules and even goes to the point of advocating using poor grammar to save words. I've also seen some people who suggest that 30-minute online courses can do a job just as well as a course of several hours. Well, I ask those people, do they think books are a waste of time, that you can do everything you need to in a few pages? Balderdash. So the point of this brief screencast is to say that you need to avoid being too concise. You need to avoid making short rules almost a fetish. It's easy to say that rules should be quick to read and convey a lot of information. Of course, we want that of all writing. Conciseness is always desirable in writing. But there are limits, and when you go beyond those limits, where you end up is something that's either incomplete or incomprehensible. So, concise cannot be at the expense of understanding. Someone suggested that Twitter is a good way to practice being concise, but it's also an example of how something that's too short becomes confused and confusing. If you've been on Twitter for very long and read a lot, sometimes you just don't understand what the people are saying because they've tried to be too concise. So, it depends, like most things. It depends on your audience or your target market. For example, if your audience typically wants limited games, which are also almost always shallow games, 15 to 30 minutes, then quick rules make a lot of sense. You can't have many rules and still achieve such short games, especially if you have more than 2 players. These people probably won't bother with long rules if they don't want to bother with long games. If people in your target market like longer games, then they'll likely tolerate longer rules. If your audience typically plays a game 1 to 3 times and then moves on to the next, you might not worry so much about the rule problems you can get from being too concise, because they won't play often enough to run across the problems. Now, they also may not play your game correctly, but if they're only going to play it 1 to 3 times anyway, oh well. Now, if your audience likes to study games and to play good games many times, then you'd be better off not to risk the problems of being too concise. Because if you're too concise, that's going to cause problems as these people study the games and play over and over and over again. Of course, the more you test your rules writing, the better you can tell whether you're too concise or too wordy. Thanks for listening.